Commander Rick Hayes pulled his helmet tight as he stepped out of the shuttle and onto the surface of the dead world. 5 years had passed since the Council drove humanity into the dark spaces beyond their territory. 5 years of moving from one barren rock to another, always searching for something better, always running low on supplies. The planet beneath his boots looked like all the others they had found in this region. Gray dirt, no atmosphere worth breathing, and the twisted remains of something that might have been cities a very long time ago. Rick's team spread out behind him, their instruments scanning for anything useful. "Commander, you need to see this," called Lieutenant Sophie Adams from about 50 meters away. She was kneeling next to what looked like a piece of metal, but as Rick got closer, he saw it was something else entirely. The surface moved slightly, like it was breathing. "What the hell is that?" asked Sergeant Billy Turner, raising his weapon. Instinctively. "Unknown," Sophie replied, running her scanner over the object. "It's giving off some kind of energy signature, but it's unlike anything in our databases." Rick studied the readings on his tablet. The object was definitely artificial, but it didn't match any technology from the Council species. More importantly, it was recent. Whatever had made this thing was still active somewhere in this region of space. "Pack it up carefully," Rick ordered. "We need to get this back to the fleet for proper analysis." The human fleet consisted of almost 3,000 ships of various sizes, from massive colony vessels carrying millions of people to small scout ships like the one Rick commanded. They moved constantly through the uncharted regions, never staying in one place long enough to be tracked by Council forces. When Rick returned to the flagship New Horizon, he found Admiral Rodriguez waiting for him in the main laboratory. The old admiral looked tired, as they all did these days. 5 years of exile had aged everyone, but Rodriguez carried the weight of keeping 2 billion humans alive in hostile space. "What do you have for me, Commander?" Rodriguez asked. Dr. Amy Foster looked up from the object they had brought back. Her face was pale. "Admiral, this is not good news. This technology is definitely not from any Council species. It's organic in nature, but designed. Someone or something grew this rather than built it." "How recent?" Rodriguez asked. "Based on the decay patterns, I'd say this piece broke off from something larger within the last month. Whatever made it is close." Before anyone could respond, the ship's communication system activated. Captain Lisa Bennett's voice came through the speakers. "Admiral, we're receiving a distress signal from the Outer Scout Network. Commander Hayes, you need to hear this." They moved quickly to the bridge where Bennett had the signal ready to play. The voice that came through was strained and frightened. "This is Lieutenant Mark Johnson on Scout Ship Eagle 7. We found them, Admiral. We found what's been killing the civilizations out here. They're called Devourers, and they're heading toward Council space. Estimated arrival time 18 months. My ship is damaged and we're being pursued. Transmitting all data now." The signal cut to static. Bennett immediately began trying to re-establish contact, but Rick knew they would not hear from Eagle 7 again. Lieutenant Johnson had done his job, though. The data was coming through now, and what it showed made everyone on the bridge go quiet. The Devourers were massive organic ships, each one the size of a small moon. They moved through space like a plague, consuming everything in their path. Planets, stations, entire fleets disappeared into their hulls, broken down and absorbed. The data showed attack patterns from dozens of dead systems, all following the same horrifying sequence. "How many?" Rodriguez asked quietly. Dr. Foster worked at her station, analyzing the data. "At least 50 major vessels, plus hundreds of smaller ones. Admiral, this is a full invasion force." Engineer Danny Cooper had been studying the technical readings. "Sir, their technology is completely biological. They don't use metals or traditional power sources. Everything is grown and evolved rather than built." "What does that mean for the Council?" asked Captain Bennett. "It means their weapons and defenses are useless," Cooper replied. "Council technology is all energy-based and designed to fight ships like their own. These things absorb energy. Their hulls actually get stronger when hit with conventional weapons." Rick felt a cold understanding settle in his stomach. "The Council exiled us because they thought we were too violent and unpredictable. But that's exactly what it takes to fight something like this." "Exactly," said Dr. Foster. The Devourers have survived by being able to predict and counter every defensive strategy they encounter. They've been doing this for thousands of years, maybe longer. But human tactics are chaos, Rodriguez finished. We change strategies mid-battle. We adapt and improvise. We do things that don't make sense to any logical military mind. Sophie Adams had been reviewing the historical data from the dead worlds. Admiral, I think I understand the pattern now. The Devourers sweep through this region every few thousand years. They consume everything and then go dormant until the next cycle. The Council species have always been protected because other races fought them off first. Races like humans, Rick said, probably. The archaeological evidence suggests there have been several aggressive species in this region over the millennia. Each time the Devourers came, these species fought them back. But this time the Council drove away their protectors, Rodriguez said grimly. The bridge fell silent as everyone processed this information. Somewhere out in the dark, a force that had destroyed civilizations for millennia was moving toward the galaxy's heart. The peaceful Council species had no idea what was coming, and even if they did, they had no way to fight it. Sir, Bennett said carefully, we should warn them. Should we? Rodriguez asked. They exiled us, called us too violent for their peaceful society. Let them handle this with their diplomacy and meditation. Admiral, Rick said, we're talking about billions of innocent people. Children who had nothing to do with the Council's decision. Rodriguez stared out at the stars for a long moment. You're right, of course, but even if we wanted to help, we're too far away. It would take us months to reach Council space, and by then it might be too late. Dr. Foster looked up from her instruments. Actually, Admiral, there might be a way. The data from Eagle 7 includes hyperspace readings from the Devourer ships. If we can figure out their route, we might be able to intercept them at the edge of Council territory. With what? Asked Cooper. We've got civilian ships and a handful of military vessels. They have an armada. We have something they don't expect, Rick said. We have humanity. Rodriguez nodded slowly. Start analyzing their route. I want options. Within 12 hours. And get me a communication channel to Earth. It's time to see if the Council wants to negotiate. As the crew dispersed to their tasks, Rick remained on the bridge looking out at the stars. 5 years ago, the Council had branded humanity as too dangerous for civilized society. Now that same dangerous nature might be the only thing standing between civilization and complete destruction. The galaxy was about to learn what humans could do when they had nothing left to lose except each other. General Patricia Lee sat in the communications center of the hidden base, listening to the desperate voices coming from Council space. 18 months had passed since Lieutenant Johnson's final transmission, and the Devourers had arrived exactly when the human scouts predicted they would. The first world to fall was Keth Prime, homeworld of the golden-winged bird people who had been so eager to see humanity exiled. Patricia watched the emergency broadcasts as they came in, her face showing no emotion. The Cathari had 3 hours from first contact to complete silence. General, we're receiving another transmission from the Cathari Defense Fleet. Reported. Sergeant Nancy White from her station. Put it through, Patricia ordered. The voice that came through was filled with panic and static. This is Admiral Krickstall to any ships in range. The enemy vessels are absorbing our weapons fire. Repeat, our energy weapons are making them stronger. We need immediate assistance. Our shields are failing and... The transmission cut to silence. Patricia had known Admiral Krickstall personally. The proud Cathari warrior had been one of the voices calling for human exile 6 years ago. Now he was dead, along with his entire fleet and probably his entire species. Dr. Kevin Shaw looked up from his analysis station. General, the pattern is consistent with what we expected. The Devourers are targeting the most advanced civilizations. First, the Cathari neural networks made them easy prey for the psychic attacks. What about the others? Patricia asked. The Zephyrin Collective is trying to evacuate their core worlds, but their hive mind structure is actually making things worse. The Devourers seem to be able to overwhelm entire hive clusters at once. Patricia nodded grimly. The insect aliens had evolved beyond individual consciousness, linking their minds into massive collective networks. Against most threats, This gave them incredible coordination and processing power. Against the Devourers, it made them sitting ducks. Captain Ben Walker entered the communication center carrying a datapad. "General, we've been monitoring Vorthak transmissions. They're trying to use their crystal technology to create some kind of barrier around their home system." "Will it work?" Patricia asked. "Unknown, but probably not. Every species the Devourers have encountered over the millennia has tried similar approaches. None of them survived. The crystal beings called Vorthak were perhaps the most ancient members of the Council. Their cities were grown rather than built, massive crystal formations that could channel enormous amounts of energy. If anyone could create an effective defense, it would be them." "General," called Sergeant White, "we're receiving a priority transmission on the old diplomatic channels." Patricia raised an eyebrow. Those channels had been closed since the exile. "Put it through." The face that appeared on the main screen was one Patricia recognized. Chancellor Vextar looked older and much more tired than she remembered. The arrogant confidence that had marked his speech during the exile was gone, replaced by something that looked like desperation. "This is Chancellor Vextar of the Galactic Council to any human vessels receiving this transmission. We formally request immediate military assistance against the hostile force currently attacking our territories. We are prepared to discuss terms for the restoration of full diplomatic relations." The transmission ended. Patricia stared at the blank screen for a moment, then started laughing. It was not a pleasant sound. 6 years, she said to the room. 6 years ago, this same alien told us we were too violent and dangerous for their peaceful society. Now he wants our help. Dr. Shaw cleared his throat. "General, regardless of past grievances, we are talking about the potential extinction of multiple species, billions of innocent civilians." "Are we?" Patricia asked. "The Council made their choice when they exiled us. They chose peace over strength, diplomacy over defense. Now they get to live with that choice." "Ma'am," said Captain Walker carefully, "Admiral Rodriguez has been trying to reach you. He wants to discuss the Council's request." Patricia sighed and activated her communication console. Rodriguez's face appeared, looking as tired as she felt. "Patricia, tell me you got the transmission from the Council." "I got it." "What do you want me to say, Carl? That we should rush to save the people who cast us out into the dark?" "I want you to remember that we're human," Rodriguez replied. "We don't abandon people to die just because they made mistakes." "Mistakes?" Patricia's voice rose. "They exiled 2 billion humans. They condemned our children to grow up as refugees in unknown space. They called us dangerous animals unfit for civilization. And now civilization needs dangerous animals to survive," Rodriguez said quietly. "The question is whether we're going to let our anger destroy everything, or whether we're going to be better than they were." Patricia looked around the communication center. Her staff was listening to every word, and she could see the conflict in their faces. Everyone here had lost something in the exile. Homes, careers, friends, family members who chose to stay behind rather than face the unknown. "What are you proposing, Admiral?" she asked. "A meeting. President Carter is convening an emergency session of the Human Council. We need to decide this together." "And what about the Devourers? How long do we have?" Dr. Shaw answered from his station. "Based on their current rate of advance, they'll reach the Council core worlds within 2 months. After that, they'll start expanding outward in all directions." "Including toward us," Patricia realized. "Yes, General. Whether we help the Council or not, we're going to face these things eventually. The question is whether we fight them alone, or with allies." Patricia thought about the dead worlds they had found in the outer regions, entire civilizations reduced to empty husks floating in space. The Devourers had been doing this for thousands of years, and they had never been stopped, permanently. They always came back. "Rodriguez, if we do this, it's not going to be a rescue mission. It's going to be a war unlike anything the galaxy has ever seen." "I know," the Admiral replied. "The Council species have never fought a real war. They've had peace for 1,000 years because other species did their fighting for them. But we're not other species." "No," Patricia agreed. "We're not. She looked at the star charts showing the Devourer advance. 3 more worlds had gone silent while they talked. Millions of beings were dying every hour, consumed by an enemy their leaders had no idea how to fight. Send a reply to Chancellor. Fextar, Patricia ordered. Tell him we received his message and we're considering his request, but make sure he understands something. If humanity returns to Council space, it won't be as the exiled outcasts begging for readmittance. It will be as the force that stands between civilization and complete destruction. General, asked Sergeant White, what about terms? What do we want in exchange for our help? Patricia smiled, and this time it was not a pleasant expression at all. Everything, she said. We want everything they took from us, and everything they should have given us in the first place. The Council drove us out because they thought we were too dangerous for their peaceful galaxy. Now they're going to learn exactly how dangerous we can be when we have nothing left to lose. The communication center fell silent, except for the constant stream of distress calls from dying worlds. The Council had created this situation through their arrogance and fear. Now they would face the consequences of their choices, one way or another. Admiral Rodriguez stood at the head of the war table aboard the flagship Liberty's Edge, looking at the faces of humanity's leaders. The Emergency Human Council had been meeting for 6 hours, and the debate was getting more heated with each passing minute. Commander Tim Brooks slammed his hand on the table. We're talking about entire species being wiped out while we sit here arguing about politics. Every hour we delay, millions more die. Captain Maria Santos shook her head. And what about the millions of humans who died during our exile? What about the children who grew up homeless because the Council decided we were too dangerous for their precious peace? That's exactly the kind of thinking that got us exiled in the first place, Brooks shot back. We can't let revenge cloud our judgment. This isn't about revenge, Santos replied. It's about respect. If we go running back to save them without demanding anything in return, we'll be right back where we started. Second-class citizens in our own galaxy. President John Carter had been listening to the arguments without speaking. The elected leader of humanity in exile looked older than his 50 years, worn down by the weight of keeping 2 billion people alive in hostile space. Finally, he raised his hand for silence. Dr. Davis, give us your assessment of the Devourer threat, he said. Dr. Helen Davis activated the holographic display in the center of the table. The image showed the galaxy with red zones marking Devourer-controlled space. The situation is catastrophic. We've lost contact with 12 major worlds in the past week alone. Their advance is accelerating as they absorb more resources. How long before they reach human space? Carter asked. At current rates, 18 months. Maybe less if they decide to expand in multiple directions simultaneously. So we're going to face them regardless, observed General Lee from her position at the far end of the table. The question is whether we face them with allies or alone. Commander Brooks nodded. Exactly. And fighting alongside the Council species gives us access to their industrial base, their resources, their knowledge. What knowledge? Santos demanded. They've been peaceful for 1,000 years. They have no idea how to fight a real war. But they have infrastructure we need, said engineer Danny Cooper. Shipyards, manufacturing centers, supply lines. We can't build a fleet capable of stopping the Devourers using just our exile resources. Dr. Davis brought up another display showing Devourer ship configurations. There's something else to consider. These creatures adapt to whatever they face. If we fight them alone, they'll learn our tactics and counter them. But if we coordinate with other species, create truly unpredictable combined strategies, we might actually have a chance, Carter finished. The president stood and walked to the viewport looking out at the stars. Somewhere out there, the Council worlds were burning. The same aliens who had condemned humanity as too violent were watching their peaceful civilization crumble under assault from something they couldn't understand. I've made my decision, Carter announced. We're going back. But not as supplicants begging for readmission. We're going back as the dominant military power in the galaxy. What are our terms? Asked General Lee. Complete military authority over all Council defense forces, permanent human bases in every system, authority to override any Council decision that affects galactic security. and formal recognition of humanity as the primary guardian species of the galaxy. Captain Santos whistled low. That's everything short of direct rule. It's everything we should have had from the beginning, Carter replied. The Council made a choice 6 years ago. They chose to exile the one species capable of protecting them. Now they pay the price for that choice. 2 hours later, Admiral Rodriguez stood on the bridge of the Liberty's Edge as the human fleet prepared to enter Council space for the first time in 6 years. The force was smaller than he would have liked, but it was what they had. 57 military vessels of various sizes, supported by a fleet train of supply ships and mobile bases. Captain Luke Anderson commanded the advance force from his ship Retribution. Admiral, we're receiving multiple distress signals from the Zolonian system. It looks like the Devourers have reached the Council core worlds. Time to intercept? Rodriguez asked. 4 hours at maximum speed. But Admiral, the enemy force is massive. At least 20 major bioships plus escorts. Rodriguez studied the tactical display. The Devourers had positioned themselves perfectly to cut off any retreat from the Zolonian homeworld. It was a classic siege formation, designed to force the defenders into a hopeless last stand. What would the Council do? He asked his tactical officer. Lieutenant Colonel Janet Price thought for a moment. Deploy their forces in a defensive formation around the planet. Try to absorb the attack and hope their shields hold long enough for reinforcements to arrive. Exactly. A logical, predictable response, which is exactly what the Devourers expect. Rodriguez turned to his communications officer. Signal the fleet. We're not going to fight this battle the way the Council would fight it. The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Zolonian system and immediately scattered in 12 different directions. To any observer, it would look like panic, like a force that had seen the size of the enemy and decided to run. The Devourers reacted exactly as Rodriguez had hoped. Half their force broke off from the siege to pursue what they thought were fleeing ships. The other half maintained position around the planet, confident that they could finish off the defenders and then hunt down the scattered humans at their leisure. They had no idea what they were facing. Captain Anderson's ship emerged from behind, Zalos Prime's largest moon at full speed, targeting the bioship's sensory clusters with kinetic rounds instead of energy weapons. The Devourers had evolved to absorb and redirect energy, but they had no defense against simple mass moving at high velocity. At the same time, Commander Rick Hayes led a strike force directly through the enemy formation, not engaging, but simply creating chaos and confusion. His ships moved in patterns that made no tactical sense, forcing the Devourers to constantly adjust their positions. The breakthrough came when Dr. Cooper's new quantum disruptors proved effective against the bioship's cellular structure. The weapons didn't destroy the enemy vessels, but they disrupted their ability to regenerate and adapt. For the first time in millennia, the Devourers found themselves facing weapons they couldn't simply absorb and counter. The battle lasted 18 hours. When it was over, the human fleet had lost 3 ships, including Captain Jennifer Stone's vessel Defiant. Her sacrifice had bought time for the evacuation of over 2 million Zolonian civilians. Chancellor Vexitar met Rodriguez aboard the Liberty's Edge the next day. The alien leader looked broken, his arrogance replaced by desperate gratitude. Admiral, the Council formally surrenders all military authority to human command. We accept your terms without reservation. Rodriguez studied the surrender document carefully. Everything was there. Complete military authority, permanent bases, override powers, recognition as the galaxy's primary defenders. It was more than any human leader had dared to dream 6 years ago. Chancellor, Rodriguez said quietly, 6 years ago you called us too dangerous for civilized society. You exiled us because you feared our violent nature. We were wrong, Vexitar replied. We understand that now. Good. Because you're about to learn exactly how dangerous we can be when we're fighting for something we believe in. Rodriguez signed the document and handed it back to the Chancellor. Outside the viewport, human ships were already beginning to establish patrol routes through Council space. The exile was over, but the real war was just beginning. Captain Emma Phillips stood on the bridge of the massive dreadnought Vindication, watching human patrol ships move through space that had once been forbidden to her species. 6 months had passed since the Battle of Zelos Prime, and the war against the Devourers was finally turning in their favor. The campaign had been brutal and costly. Humanity had lost over 40 ships and thousands of personnel, but they had accomplished something no other species had managed in millennia. They had stopped the Devourer advance and begun pushing them back into the dark regions of space. Captain, we're receiving a transmission from Admiral Rodriguez, reported Communications Officer Peter Clark. Put him through, Emma ordered. The Admiral's face appeared on the main screen, broadcasting from the command center on Zelos Prime. Captain Phillips, I need you to escort the Council delegation to the signing ceremony. President Carter wants our most advanced ship representing humanity today. Understood, Admiral. What's the final count on rescued populations? Over 3 billion beings evacuated from threatened worlds. The Vorthak crystal cities held out longer than expected, and we managed to save about 60% of their population. The Cathari weren't so lucky. Emma nodded grimly. The golden-winged people had been reduced from a population of 12 billion to fewer than 2 million survivors. Their homeworld was nothing but an empty shell now, stripped of all life by the Devourer bioships. Admiral, what about the remaining Devourer forces? Commander Hayes is tracking the last major fleet group through the outer systems. They're running now, but we can't let them escape to breed and recover. This has to end permanently. The signing ceremony took place aboard the newly constructed space station Unity 1, built in orbit around the saved world of Zelos Prime. Representatives from all surviving Council species gathered in the Great Hall, along with delegations from 17 newly contacted races that human scouts had rescued from the dark regions. President Carter stood at the podium, looking out at the assembled aliens. Many of them were species that had never heard of the Galactic Council before human expeditions found them hiding in remote systems, fleeing from Devourer attacks over the centuries. Today we establish a new order for our galaxy, Carter began, not based on the fear that drove the old council, but on the strength that comes from unity and mutual protection. Chancellor Vextar approached the signing table first. The Zelonian leader had aged visibly during the war, but his voice was steady as he spoke. The Zelonian Republic formally accepts human military leadership and pledges our full support to the new Galactic Covenant. One by one, the other species followed. The surviving Cathari, the Crystal Vorthak, the remnants of the Zephyrin Collective, and dozens of smaller races. Each signature represented not just political agreement, but acknowledgement of a new reality. Humanity had become the galaxy's protectors, not through conquest but through sacrifice. The ceremony was interrupted by an urgent communication from Commander Hayes. His face appeared on the hall's main display, broadcasting from the bridge of his scout ship at the edge of known space. Mr. President, we've found something you need to see. The Devourers weren't just randomly attacking. They were following a pattern, a cycle that's been going on for millions of years. Dr. Shaw stepped forward to interpret the data Hayes was transmitting. The evidence suggests the Devourers are controlled by something else, something ancient that uses them to harvest biological material from the galaxy at regular intervals. Are you saying there's something worse than the Devourers out there? Carter asked. Possibly, but more importantly, I think I know why humanity was able to stop them when no one else could. The hall fell silent as everyone waited for the explanation. Every other species in galactic history has followed predictable patterns. They develop technology, establish governments, create military forces based on logical principles. The Devourers evolved to counter all of that. But humans are chaos, finished General Lee from her position near the president. We don't follow patterns. We adapt and change and do things that don't make sense to any logical mind. Exactly. The Devourers couldn't predict us because we don't predict ourselves. Our dangerous nature, our tendency toward violence and unpredictable behavior, made us the first species in millions of years that they couldn't easily counter. President Carter looked around the hall at the assembled delegates. So the very traits that got us exiled 6 years ago were exactly what the galaxy needed to survive. The council was right about one thing, said Admiral Rodriguez over the communication link. Humans are dangerous. We're dangerous to anyone who threatens the innocent. Dangerous to anyone who tries to destroy what we're sworn to protect. The formal signing continued, but the mood in the hall had changed. This wasn't just about establishing new political arrangements. It was about recognizing a fundamental truth that the old council had missed. Peace wasn't the absence of violence. Peace was the presence of those willing to fight for it. Captain Phillips watched from her position near the ceremonial guard as President Carter signed the final document. The new Galactic Covenant established humanity as the primary defense force for the galaxy, with permanent authority over all military matters and the right to establish bases wherever needed. But more than that, it recognized something that had been missing from the old council's philosophy. The galaxy was not a safe place. It was full of threats that peaceful diplomacy couldn't resolve. It needed guardians, protectors who understood that sometimes violence was the only way to preserve peace. 3 weeks later, Phillips stood in the same spot on her ship's bridge, but now she was watching something different. Human ships were escorting the first new colony vessels toward worlds that had been abandoned for centuries, worlds that were finally safe again. The communication system activated, and she heard a familiar voice. Ambassador Jake Morrison was speaking from the council chambers, the same hall where he had been told humanity was too dangerous for civilized society. The establishment of Sector Defense Command 14 is now complete, Morrison announced. Human forces will maintain permanent presence in this region to prevent any return of hostile forces. Phillips smiled as she listened. Morrison had been present at humanity's exile, and now he was coordinating their permanent return as the galaxy's acknowledged protectors. The aliens who had cast them out now looked to them for safety. The irony was perfect, but more than that, it was justice. The council had been wrong about humanity's nature being incompatible with peace. They had simply misunderstood what peace actually required. It required strength, courage, and yes, the willingness to be dangerous when danger threatened the innocent. Priority signal interrupted her thoughts. Commander Hayes was calling from the deep exploration region, his voice excited. "Captain, you're not going to believe what we found out here. There are more species, entire civilizations that have been hiding from the Devourers for thousands of years. They want to join the Covenant." Phillips activated her response channel. "How many species are we talking about, Commander?" "At least 50 so far, and we've barely started exploring. Captain, the galaxy is much bigger and more populated than anyone realized. The old council only knew about the species in their immediate region." As Phillips processed this information, she realized they were witnessing the birth of something unprecedented. Not just a new government or alliance, but a truly galactic civilization united under human protection. The species that had been exiled for being too dangerous had become the foundation for the largest peaceful alliance in galactic history. The Council had driven humans out because they feared what humanity might do. Now they knew. Humanity protected, the innocent, defended the weak, and stood guard against the darkness between the stars. The galaxy had learned too late that peace was not the absence of warriors, but the presence of the right kind of warriors fighting for the right reasons. And humanity had proven they were exactly the warriors the galaxy needed. Jake Morrison stood in the center of the Great Hall and watched as the alien beings around him prepared to change his life forever. The council chamber was huge and filled with creatures he had spent years learning to understand. Tall, bird-like, beings with golden feathers sat next to crystal creatures that sparkled in the light. Bug-like aliens with 6 arms moved their hands as they talked to each other in clicking sounds. The human ambassador wore his best uniform, but felt small in this place. Earth had worked for 50 years to join this group. They had followed every rule and tried to prove they belonged among the stars with these advanced races. Jake had spent the last 10 years of his life trying to make this dream come true. Chancellor Vextar rose from his seat at the front of the room. The tall gray alien had 4 arms and eyes that glowed blue in the dim light. His voice filled the chamber when he spoke. "We have reached our decision about the human application for full membership in the Galactic Council. Jake felt his heart beat faster. Around him, representatives from 12 different worlds waited to hear the verdict. The Cathari spread their golden wings slightly. The crystal Vorthak made soft ringing sounds as they moved. The insect Zephyrins clicked their mandibles together. After careful review of human behavior over the past decades, we find that your species is not ready for peaceful coexistence with the galactic community. Vextar continued. Humans show too much aggression and unpredictable behavior. Your wars, your violence, your inability to resolve conflicts without force make you dangerous to our peaceful society. The words hit Jake like a physical blow. He had expected this might happen, but had hoped his years of work would matter. Chancellor, with respect, humanity has not engaged in any conflicts since joining the Outer Trade Agreements. We have followed every protocol and helped mediate disputes between other species. That is true, said Vorthak Representative Christine, her voice like bells ringing. But your history shows a pattern of violence. Your own planet has seen countless wars. Even now, some humans argue for military expansion. Every species has a violent past, Jake replied. The Cathari had the wing wars that lasted 3 centuries. The Zephyrins consumed 7 other species before joining the Council, yet you accepted them. Those conflicts were in our distant past, clicked hive mind Zex of the Zephyrins. Humans showed aggression as recently as last century. You are not evolved enough for our level of civilization. Jake looked around the room and saw no friendly faces. Even the smaller species that humans had helped seemed to avoid his eyes. What exactly are you proposing? Complete withdrawal, Vextar announced. All human colonies, trading posts, diplomatic missions, and military bases must be removed from Council space within 6 months. Humans will be restricted to the Outer Rim and beyond. No human vessel may enter Council territory without facing immediate detention. The room fell silent except for the soft humming of the environmental systems. Jake felt the weight of 2 billion humans across dozens of worlds pressing down on him. Families who had built new lives among the stars, children born on distant planets who knew no other home, scientists and explorers who had dedicated their lives to peaceful contact with alien races. This is exile, Jake said quietly. You are casting out an entire species because you fear what we might do, not because of anything we have done. It is a necessary precaution, replied Vextar. The galaxy has enjoyed peace for over 1,000 years under Council guidance. We will not risk that peace for one aggressive species. And if we refuse to leave? Jake asked, though he already knew the answer. Then you will be removed by force, stated Admiral Krixtal of the Cathari Defense Force. Our combined fleets are more than sufficient to ensure compliance. Jake activated his communication device and sent an emergency signal to Earth. Within minutes, he received confirmation that Captain Lisa Bennett was standing by with the human fleet. The message was brief but clear. Earth was prepared to fight, if necessary, but the odds were not in their favor. We need time to organize such a massive evacuation, Jake said. 6 months is not enough to move 2 billion people and all their possessions. You have 6 months, Vextar repeated. No extensions will be granted. The Council has spoken. As the session ended, Jake found himself alone in the Great Chamber. The aliens filed out in their separate groups, talking among themselves in languages he had spent years learning. None of them approached him. None offered sympathy or regret. They had made their decision and seemed relieved to be done with the human problem. Jake activated his personal communicator and connected to Admiral Carl Rodriguez back on Earth. The old soldier's face appeared on the small screen, lined with worry and anger. How bad is it, Jake? Complete exile. 6 months to evacuate everything beyond the Outer Rim. They've made up their minds and nothing I said made any difference. Rodriguez nodded grimly. We've been preparing for this possibility. Captain Bennett has been moving supplies and setting up temporary bases in the uncharted regions. Dr. Amy Foster has been studying potential worlds for resettlement. 2 billion people, Carl. How do we move 2 billion people in 6 months? The same way we've done everything else. One step at a time. We've survived ice ages and world wars and the first steps into space. We'll survive this too. Jake looked around the empty chamber one more time. 50 years of human dreams lay shattered in this room. Generations of work to prove humanity deserved a place among the stars had been dismissed in a single afternoon. But as he walked toward the exit, Jake felt something unexpected rising in his chest. Not despair, but determination. The council thought they were getting rid of a problem. They believed casting humans into the unknown would make them safer. They had no idea what they had just unleashed. Humanity had always been at its best when faced with impossible odds. The galaxy was about to learn what humans could accomplish when they had nothing left to lose. Jake stepped out of the council chamber and into an uncertain future. Behind him lay everything humanity had worked for. Ahead lay the vast unknown, regions of space that no council species had dared to explore. The aliens thought they were ending a threat. Instead, they had just created something far more dangerous than they could imagine. They had created a species with nothing to lose and everything to prove.